repping Packers fans in the 715. It's the 715 Green and Gold Tailgate Podcast.
Hey, what is going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the 715 Green and Gold Tailgate Podcast. Dan Casper here with you, and we are going to cover a lot of different things here. We're going to continue our self-scouting, off-season self-scouting series, taking a look at running backs and the Packers' offensive line. I want to take a look at that. We're going to talk with Joe Daguanno for a little bit, and then we're going to talk Brian Gutekunst, Packers general manager Brian Gutekunst, and kind of his job performance since he's been hired as general manager. I'll go into a little bit more details on that when we get to it. But first, we're gonna kick off this episode of the podcast with some more off-season self-scouting, and we're going to take a look at the running backs first. So let's jump right into it. Looking at the running backs, again, with an eye towards the previous season and an eye towards this offseason and upcoming season. Josh Jacobs, looking at this past year, Josh Jacobs was the man. Is it fair to say Josh Jacobs was your best offensive playmaker this year? I think that's fair to say. Ends up finishing 6th in the league in rushing yards, 1,329. 6th in the league in carries, 301. 4th in the league in touchdowns with 15. Averaged 4.4 yards per carry. I'll be straight up. That exceeded my expectations. The fact that we were just outside the top 5 and for a big chunk of this season in the top 5, even top 3 in running the football, it's been a while. I mean, we've had 1,000-yard rushers and such, but to have those type of numbers, it's been a little bit in Green Bay. And a lot of it was because of, well, you had to with Jordan Love banged up and such. So heading into next year, he's going to be, well, in fact, he's going to be 27 here on February 11th, so still fairly young at, I know running backs age a little bit differently, but still 27 coming into this following year. We know he's at the top of the depth chart, number 1. Numero uno one, whatever. After that, there's maybe a little bit of intrigue. Now, Marshawn Lloyd, he's going to be, I think, if he's healthy, which hopefully he is this upcoming year, but he's going to be your number 2 back. Green Bay selected him fairly early in the draft, a day 2 pick. And there's expectations, fairly high expectations, for Marshawn Lloyd to be a big-time contributor for this offense. If he would have been healthy this year, would Jacobs' numbers been down? Would it have been a little bit more of a running back by committee? I mean, I think Jacobs' numbers might have been down just a little bit, but I don't think it would have been an even split by any means. Now, could it be a Montgomery and Gibbs type of role with these two guys? I think maybe that's the ceiling or the highest of possible outcomes over there. But I think what Marshawn Lloyd potentially brings to Green Bay is going to be a little bit more of a, maybe a little bit more of a big play or kind of an outside runner sort of thing. Josh Jacobs in between the tackles, kind of the wrecking ball type of back. And I was looking at his draft profile from last year, a little bit earlier, and his player comp was like a Jerick McKinnon. So And one of the write-ups for him was he's a good complementary option with big play potential. And I think that's a nice compliment to a running back with the running style of Josh Jacobs. So Marshawn Lloyd's a part of this equation. You just hope that the guy can stay healthy. After that, you've got a couple of different options. You've got Emmanuel Wilson, who this year, with more of a role, finished with 502 yards on the ground rushing, 4 touchdowns, a 4.9 average. A little bit more of an expanded role for Emmanuel Wilson this year, and that was because of no Marshawn Lloyd and no A.J. Dillon, and we'll get to A.J. Dillon here in a second. But we also got to see Chris Brooks for a little bit, And, I mean, only $183 on the ground for him on 36 carries. But we saw Chris Brooks in a little bit of a hybrid H-back type of role this year for Green Bay. On the field a little bit for blocking purposes and such. And you could tell just by watching games and hearing Matt LaFleur that they really like what Chris Brooks brings to the table. Some of that versatility there. And remember, this is a guy, too, he spent a hot minute with the Dolphins. Was it last year, I think, when they were just decimated by injuries? He had over 100 yards. Yeah, it was, when was this game coming? Let me see if I can bring it up here. That thing's being slow. But anyways, so he spent a hot minute in 2023 with the Dolphins there. So could that versatility help him out? And I think he may have played a role similar to what they probably envisioned for A.J. Dillon this year. Because A.J. Dillon, I think a lot of us were kind of maybe hoping to see, would he transition into like a fullback type role or an H-back type of role with his size in that? You bring in Josh Jacobs. You draft Marshawn Lloyd. You bring back A.J. Dillon. So what's that role? Maybe it's like an H-back, fullback type of role over there. But the neck injury that held him out all year and a big chunk of the preseason, I think because of that, you're not going to see A.J. Dillon back in Green Bay. We know Green Bay historically has been cautious with those, with like neck injuries and those type of injuries. Now, I haven't heard of any long-term concerns, issues with A.J. Dillon. I know A.J. Dillon just kind of looking on his social media posts and all that. Seems like he's getting ready for this season. I think he would prefer to stay in Green Bay, the mayor of Door County. I mean, everything, all the above. But when you look at, you've got your top two already with Jacobs and Lloyd still going to get another shot at this. And you saw the production from an Emmanuel Wilson this year. You saw maybe a little versatility from Chris Brooks. I think A.J. Dillon's on the outside looking in. And that, I hate saying that because I like A.J. Dillon. He's my kid, he's my kid's one of his favorite players. So, I mean, he's going to hate that and such. But you look at injury with that neck. And remember, too, last year he was dealing with some stuff and came back, and then with this injury here too, I don't see Green Bay bringing him back. So if you had to pick one of those three, who's it going to be? And it's hard not to look at the production that Emmanuel Wilson brought to the team in his opportunities. I mean, 4.9 yards per carry. I think kind of a quiet 500 yards on the ground rushing. And the thing is he's actually a little bit bigger than Chris Brooks too. But I think they view Chris Brooks as maybe a little bit of a home run type of player, home run threat over there. So I think if I'm basing it straight off production, I'm probably keeping Emmanuel Wilson. If I had to pick between these three. Now, it is very possible that Green Bay could draft another running back, maybe a late day three pick, and you go a little bit younger of a route there, and then Emmanuel Wilson's going to have to try to win a job again in preseason because he's been like the preseason MVP for the last 2 years here. But given what we've seen from Emmanuel Wilson, I mean, I would have no problem if Green Bay brings him back. You look at the loss against Chicago, the man had 73 yards on the ground that day. I mean, he was one of the bright spots from that day, and that was, Josh Jacobs. They sat him out for half the game. But I thought Wilson had a very solid year. And I'm very curious to see how much, and this is kind of having an eye towards the next season, with Green Bay really focused on running the football this year. And a lot of it was because they were forced to with Jordan Love's injury. But we saw the impact that Josh Jacobs had on this team. How much did it affect, because there's been this talk, did it affect Jordan Love in the passing game a little bit? Did they get away from passing a little bit too much? And Did that affect him a little bit on the offensive side of things? I get some of the arguments that are out there. I understand it and such. Matt LaFleur talked about it in his season-ending presser that they had more success running the football out of shotgun. But I feel like for Green Bay, and LaFleur is going to, I'm just going back to his presser where, the whole play action thing was a big question out there. And LaFleur's like, well, there's still different ways for play action. Essentially, he was saying a lot of us view play action as the typical under center, turning it around, quarterback taking the ball, turning around, fake handoff, blah, blah, blah. And he said there's other parts to, play action. It could be whether your guard, whether your offensive lineman's actually run blocking and then you're throwing to kind of throw them. He was going in detail, kind of like a coach would at that point. But I think what I would like to see from the running game is maybe some more running from under the center next year. And again, that could be the factor of Jordan Love and his knee injury and affecting that and all that good stuff there. But I'd like to see that, and I think you're going to have more success from the play action game from that standpoint. But I'm very curious to see if Green Bay next year is going to be super hyper-focused on the running game again with Josh Jacobs, and if Marshawn Lloyd is out there and healthy and involved in the offense. Or are they going to try to get this passing attack a little bit more consistent and better than what it was this year? But overall, I think the running game heading into next year is going to be a strong point for Green Bay. I think that's going to be one of the things that they can hang their hat on. They have Jacobs coming back. Knock on wood, he'll stay healthy again next year. You have him as your bell cow back. You know what you got with your running game. I think when we look at this team overall and you say, okay, what are the areas that you're fairly comfortable with? That you're like, okay, I'm good with it, or I'm confident in it. It's probably the running back group or the running game. And a lot of it is because of number 8 and Josh Jacobs. And also, you factor in the offensive line and such in there too. But we saw this past year the premium on running backs, especially, still veteran running backs, and how much difference makers they can be. I mean, for crying out loud, you have one team in the Super Bowl right now that is in the Super Bowl. I think a big reason why is because of their running back in Saquon Barkley. So the running game is still a premium in this league. I mean, we've gone in cycles. The NFL is a cycle. At one point, there were teams didn't give a rip about running backs. It was all passing. Now, here we go again. We're back to running the football. Defenses are going to adjust, and I guarantee you we're going to be back to, well, there's a lot of throwing. Defenses will adjust, then they're going to go back to running. It's just a cycle. It's a circle. But I think we're all pretty confident in saying that, okay, this is one group that we're pretty confident in that, okay, we're going to be able to run the football next year. And that's going to be curious, too. How do teams next year game plan for Green Bay? Is it going to be straight up right away? They're going to focus on stopping the run and focus on stopping Josh Jacobs. And if that's the case, that puts a little bit more pressure on the shoulders of Jordan Love in that passing game. And you're paying your quarterback that amount of money, you flipping better be able to take advantage of that. If you're getting some passing looks, better be able to. So let's go back to the trenches here and take a look at the offensive line for our next one up for our offseason self-scouting series when it comes to the Green and Gold. Taking a look back at this previous season with an eye towards the future. So this offensive line. Now, last week I had said that for me heading into this offseason, corner, defensive line, and wide receiver are probably the 3 most intriguing position groups for me to kind of keep tabs on and watch how the Packers address or look at those groups heading into the offseason, with offensive line right behind it. Because it'll be curious for me to see if the Packers, what do they do with Josh Myers, their starting center? Josh Myers, I think, is a guy, just from viewing over the last few years, like Twitter, X, whatever, the experts out there and just fans out there or whatever, it's hit or miss with Josh Myers. You either like him, you think he's serviceable, or you don't. I mean, I think what doesn't help is that he was drafted, a spot before Creed Humphrey, who's the center for the Chiefs. He's pretty dang good. So that doesn't help Josh Myers, with his outlook and that sort of thing. But there's no question about it when it comes to Josh Myers. He is so well respected within that franchise, within the walls of 1265 Lombardi Avenue. You hear Jordan Love talk about him. Matt LaFleur, mention him as a guy he goes to kind of get the vibe in the locker room. So regardless of what maybe some Packers fans think about Josh Myers is well respected and I think well liked within 1265, within Lambeau Field. But is he well liked enough to where maybe they give him a brand new contract extension, give him a nice pay raise, assuming it'll probably be, if we're just making it easy for argument's sake, and that double-digit million per year. Okay, let's say a 4-year deal, he's getting $15 million a year. I'm just throwing some numbers. Let me see if I can find some center contracts here. Here we go. Let me load it up. Offensive line, just for comparison's sakes here. I should have had this. I should have had this up here a little bit more. Can I break it down by center? Here we go. All right. So we've got, Creed Humphrey. He signed a 4-year, $72 million deal. That's about average of 18. You got Eric McCoy, New Orleans. Average about $12 million per year. Right now from Detroit, he's got about 13.5 per year. So let's say he gets about Connor McGovern. No, let's say he's getting Ryan Kelly type numbers from the Colts. He got a 4-year, $50 million deal. That actually expires this year. That was about $12.5 million per year. So let's say it's like 13, 14 on average per year, just for argument's sakes. Would you give that to Josh Myers? That's the big question that Green Bay has to figure out this offseason. Or do they look at this and say, we drafted Jacob Monk for the mid-round last year with the idea that he's going to be our future center? Or do they shuffle their offensive line around even more? Does an Elton Jenkins move to tackle? You're moving him from a spot that he's pretty dang good at. Do you move him over there? Does Sean Ryan move over there? Could he potentially get some reps at center? We know Zach Tom could play center. But do you want to move him from right tackle? Probably not. At some point, they're going to have Jordan Morgan in this starting group. They drafted him in the first round last year for a reason, that he's going to be a starter. And you would think that maybe entering year 2, even though he missed practically the whole season. Got some playing time here or there, but he missed a big chunk of the season. You would imagine he's going to get a shot at being a starter this year. So where does he fit in? If that's the case, whose spot is he taking? When I look at this group, I think for me, this group surpassed my expectations heading into this year. I mean, they were a very good group. Overall, they were a very good group. Rasheed Walker surpassed my expectations. I didn't know what to expect from Walker. First full year, entering in left tackle. The question was, could he be the future left tackle for this team? And I thought he did a really good job this year. I thought Sean Ryan played really good this year. It was kind of between him and Morgan. Who's going to win the right guard spot? They were kind of switching back and forth, even in games when Morgan was active. I thought Sean Ryan did a really good job. Zach Tom, to me, is one of the most underrated offensive linemen in the league, and it doesn't help that he plays right tackle because I feel like right tackles, a lot of them, get underappreciated. When it comes to contract time, though, he will not be underappreciated. Elton Jenkins, we know, is one of the better guards in the game. And we mentioned, I think this was probably Josh Myers' best year, and it just happens to be entering a contract year. We know Green Bay's got salary cap space available this year. Will they use it to bring back Myers? Will they probably re-sign, want to lock up Zach Tom long-term? Probably. That I got to imagine that's probably going to be a check mark on Goody's list to get it done, is to lock up Zach Tom. Does that mean that they're going to look at a Rasheed Walker this year, who's got another year under his contract, or a Sean Ryan, who's got another year under his contract? Maybe. Is it a big priority right away for this offseason? I would like to see that group together. But you know, too, that Green Bay's probably entering the draft. They're going to probably draft at least a lineman or two. They usually do. Not all the time, but they usually do, to try to build up their depth and such. They brought in Andre Dillard last year as a veteran presence within the group. So there's that option out there, too. But I think when it comes to, you're looking at this group, I think you focus on getting Zach Tom figured out. I don't know why. I have this sneaky suspicion, and I could be just over-exaggerating or over-imagining this. I don't know if that Zach Tom negotiation is going to go smooth. Now, I'm not saying there's going to be any drama or anything like that. But I remember last year when there was a talk about, could Zach Tom move over to center? And Zach Tom had this quote, that he'd, paraphrasing here, but he essentially play wherever, but he said, my agent probably wants me to play right tackle. And we know why he was saying that. Tackles make more money. Tackles get more money than any other position, based off average, any other position on the offensive line. So if I had to put it in priority in terms of offensive line, who do I want Green Bay to work on first and maybe kind of, I guess, lock up right away? I'm directing my attention to Zach Tom. That's who I'm kind of looking at. He's an unrestricted free agent, not until 2026. But maybe try to get that thing locked up. Then your other guys out there, your Rasheed Walker. Again, I think the Rasheed Walker is going to be an unrestricted free agent in 2026 as well. Do you try to lock him up now and maybe try to get it a little bit cheaper, even though he plays left tackle? The question for Green Bay is going to have to be, with this offensive line, how much money do they want to fully commit to the offensive line and maybe not have as much for other parts of their team? Because they got dudes that are going to be up for free agency all at the same time. Walker's going to be a free agent at the same time. If they don't re-sign Zach Tom, Walker's going to be a free agent at the same time. Zach Tom is going to be a free agent at the same time. Sean Ryan's going to be in there too. Where does Jordan Morgan fit in this whole equation? When he was drafted, Matt LaFleur and the Packers said that he was going to get a shot. That he was going to get a shot at left tackle. But then off-season, training camp, mini camps, OTAs, was primarily at guard over there. But where does he fit in this whole thing? Yeah, Sean Ryan, unrestricted free agent in 2026 as well. So, Green Bay can, if they want to, go into 2025 without paying a lot to three of their offensive linemen, without paying a lot to Zach Tom and Ryan and Rasheed Walker. They can do that. Of those three, who would you rather keep? If you could only keep one of those three, who would you rather keep? Sean Ryan, Zach Tom, or Rasheed Walker? Can only keep one. I'm kind of leaning a little bit towards Zach Tom. Now, I don't know, could Zach Tom move over and play left tackle? Possibly, maybe, if anything. But it'll be interesting to see if I had to guess, I don't think they bring back Josh Myers. I think it might be a situation where it's going to be kind of similar to John Ryan last year. Go get your value. Go find out what you're worth from other teams, and then come back to us. And then I think it's just going to take one team. And good for him. If he finds that one team or maybe two teams that's going to be willing to pay him a whole lot more than Green Bay, go cash in, man. I feel like the price range is going to be out of reach for Green Bay, or a little bit more than what they want to spend. And then I think, if I'm just going to make a prediction on January 27th, I think your opening day starting line is going to be Rasheed Walker, Elton Jenkins, Sean Ryan, Jordan Morgan, Zach Tom. That's how I think it's going to work out. We didn't get to see a whole lot, if anything, from Jacob Monk this year. So I wouldn't be surprised if, they get Zach Tom done. They don't do anything with Sean Ryan's contract. That he goes in on a contract year. Maybe they kind of try to get something done with Walker. Maybe try to get it done a little bit cheaper. That wouldn't surprise me if they try to get those two done. I don't think they'll try to work on Sean Ryan this offseason. And then I think, your depth, you're going to have some guys that are entering their second years, maybe third years over there. But don't be surprised, again, if Green Bay uses a third, fourth round pick and tries to get more depth at the offensive line. I mean, look at some of these teams look at the two teams that are alive in the Super Bowl right now. You got Creed Humphrey, you got two All-Pros on that Chiefs offensive line. Joe Thuney, who was a guard, now left tackle, All-Pro. Creed Humphrey, All-Pro. We know about Philadelphia's offensive line, for crying out loud. It's still a game up in the trenches. And with Jordan Love and with Josh Jacobs and that, I still want some big boys up front. I still want some talented guys up front. And that's why I feel like Tom's going to be a guy that's going to be re-signed for sure. I feel like it's going to be this offseason. Possibly Walker. But I would not be surprised to see Green Bay kind of dip their toes into a day 2 or very early day 3 for more offensive linemen. Maybe for a future guard or a future center in there. But, my kind of looking back at this year, when you look at the offensive line, this was a group, and they were in very rare company. Myers missed one game, and that was the only different starting combo that they had. Was it Myers, I think? But, this was a group all regular season. Was pretty dang healthy. Was pretty darn healthy. And that's rare when it comes to the offensive line. To have your same 5 up there. So, you're talking about not just the fact that it was the same 5 out there and such, but you're talking about not having to adjust to a different guy over there. The silent counts, the communications, and blocking assignments. Everybody was on the same page, and that's rare. That is very rare to happen. And I think you're going to see a big chunk of those guys back again next year, but I don't think Josh Myers is going to be back. I wouldn't be surprised to see Green Bay maybe bring in another, not saying it's Andre Dillard, but maybe another veteran. Maybe another veteran swing tackle. Guy that could come in and play left and right tackle. Because I feel like right now, if you're looking at it, that might be one of the areas of need. You look at that Philly game, and, Lucas Glover was struggling there a little bit, so they moved Kadeem Telford over there, who's more of a tackle by trade, too. So you'd think probably guard a little bit as well, but still, even though I said corner and wide receivers and defensive line to me are probably the top 3 most intriguing position groups to watch this year, offensive line is right behind them too, with the big question mark of Josh Myers, and then do they lock up Zach Tom this year, or does he go into his final year of his contract in a contract year and potentially maybe even increase his price range a little bit more? And I'm curious too, could Zach Tom play left tackle? Would that be an option that he goes over there and he's the left tackle, maybe Jordan Morgan's a right tackle? If they don't want to pay Rasheed Walker, if they have to come down to a decision like that. Do they come down to a decision of okay, we're going to give Josh Myers a contract so we can settle down on that center position, but Walker, we're not going to give him a huge contract. Zach Tom, we're going to lock him up. We're going to move him to left tackle. Does Morgan go over there then? Then you're probably looking at, and maybe that allows you to keep Ryan at guard too. There's different combos that they could go with this thing. And I think, for Morgan, we just haven't seen enough yet. We don't really know how they view him. Is it more for guard because of where he's practiced the most in the offseason? Or could he be an option for that right tackle spot if they decide to move Zach Tom like to a left tackle or something? All right, let's switch gears here a little bit, and we are going to bring in Joe Daguanno and chat a little Packers here. Joe, how you doing there, sir?
I am doing great, and I appreciate you being flexible on my schedule. I am calling in from the wonderful, beautiful, snowy Upper Peninsula. I'm in Marquette, Michigan right now, and I got to tell you, it's beautiful up here. And last night, before I tucked myself in and called it a night, had a great conversation with a longtime Packer fan up here. He talked about the fact that his Aunt Bobo was buried in a Brett Favre jersey.
Oh, my goodness.
How about that, Captain?
Great Aunt Bobo is the name?
Well, I think that was a nickname.
Okay.
So I think that was a nickname. But, Great Aunt Bobo. He walked up to the casket and the Packer pants and a Brett Favre jersey.
Wow.
So it is, it was a lot of fun talking Packer time. We were talking about, of course, when Brett Favre was put up in the facade and Bart Starr was there, and it was very cool, and it reminded me just how cool Packer fans are, and how you'll find them everywhere in the country.
I don't think that's probably the only person that was buried in a Packer jersey either. If I had to bet G-Man's 401k or my 401k on that, I think I'd be pretty confident in winning some money on that.
I think you're right. I think you're right. And you know what, Captain, real quick, in 2 nights, the movie Green and Gold premieres, and it premieres actually in Eau Claire and Chippewa. It's at the Micon Cinemas downtown Eau Claire, and it's at Micon in Chippewa. I've already got my tickets for Saturday night because I'm going to be coming back into town late. I cannot wait to see that movie. The Coach is in it, man. It's been a while since I saw the TV show, The Coach. Nelson. Yeah. Absolutely. And of course, Craig T. Nelson sang the national anthem at the Bear Packer game at the end of the year. So it's quite the phenomenon when you talk about the Green Bay Packers. And again, just last night, just a little slice of coolness talking to a gentleman at the bar up here in Marquette, Michigan.
Fun fact, when I was like a wee little lad in Medford, like a few years old, I thought the Marquette basketball team was actually up in Marquette, Michigan. So there you go. That's how not smart I was as like a 6 or 7 year old at that point. So I think
naive.
Yeah,
we're gonna go with naive, not smart.
I mean, I heard of Al McGuire in this Marquette, Michigan basketball team, or Marquette basketball team, and I always thought it was in Michigan, and lo and behold, it's actually in Wisconsin. So there you go. So. Green Bay wise, Packer wise, we've been having some off-season self-scouting series looking at different position groups and such, Joseph, and we've touched on offensive line, defensive line and such, and obviously with the Senior Bowl going on right now, I think you and I would agree, like this week and this weekend's game, if you're a Packers fan maybe trying to get a glimpse of who Goody or this front office is possibly interested in when it comes to draft, pay attention to the Senior Bowl this week, right?
No doubt. This is the interviews that the Packers conduct this week at the Senior Bowl. A lot of them will tell the story of where Goody and his staff wants to go for the draft, because more often than not, Green Bay leans into the Senior Bowl when they have these one-on-one interviews as far as looking into the future in April when they're going to be making those draft choices. So, and they do a great job. I think the Senior Bowl does just a fantastic job, and I think it gives these kids, I think this is almost more important than the Combine. I think the Combine reconfirms what you already think you want to do, or it pushes you away from that decision. That might be, you know what, these guys are neck and neck. We like them both, but we like this guy a little bit more. But I think this week is much more important and critical, especially for the Green Bay Packers, it seems, from an evaluation standpoint, than that Combine week.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, off-season stuff, we heard the other day from Tom Silverstein that the Packers are going to have Luke Getsy on staff. It says senior offensive consultant. Maybe that role changes depending on if they lose anybody else to a coordinator position or whatever. But also Rich Bisaccia is back. And, how the years have changed. I mean, a couple years ago when he was hired, you had people ecstatic, pumped up, got a special teams coach in that everybody loves. Now it seems to be almost splits that Packers fans, at least the ones on social media, are kind of like, no, we didn't want him back, want somebody new, or they're okay with it or kind of neutral. Where do you stand on the Rich Bisaccia coming back for Green Bay, at least for this year?
Captain, it's interesting because there's so much more than meets the fan's eye. And here's what I mean by that. Again, I think there are some question marks with the Packers special teams. The numbers bear that out. I think Rich Bisaccia's value to Matt LaFleur is really that trusted right-hand man, that senior level guy that you can go to that's seen more situations than you have. And so, I think I would have been really, really good with Bisaccia keeping the assistant head coach or assistant head coach title rather than special teams coordinator. That being said, though, and again, when you're a head coach, and it doesn't matter what level you're at, trust is a big thing. And when you trust someone, and this is, again, Robert Saleh coming onto the Green Bay Packers staff this last year, Luke Getsy coming back, Rich Bisaccia getting that extension. So I think his value is much more to LaFleur as that assistant head coach than it is as that special teams coordinator. And I go back to when Bisaccia was the interim head coach of the Raiders. Those guys loved him. And they were really hoping, the players on the Raiders at that time were really hoping that Bisaccia was going to get the full-time gig. So, I think there's something to be said for, again, that trust on the sidelines. I trust this guy. This guy's got my back. He's going to see different things. So I'm okay with this. I would have been much better if they would have said, hey, we're just going to let him be the assistant head coach and we're going to bring in another special teams guy. And so I would have been better with that arrangement. That being said, I am okay with Rich Bisaccia being re-signed and extended.
I'm glad you kind of brought that up with his tenure with the Raiders, too, because, I mean, how much you factor that in and keeping a guy like Bisaccia, because we heard Josh Jacobs say a big reason why he came to Green Bay, too, was because Rich Bisaccia was there. And, we've heard other players talk about that, too. So, I mean, that's got to come into to factoring whether to keep an assistant coach around, too, I would imagine, right?
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. Look, when you're putting together that coaching staff, you've got to have balance. And I've often talked about it's kind of like putting together a sales organization or a business organization. It's a puzzle. You're putting together all these puzzle pieces to make one big picture. And I think Bisaccia is a part of the puzzle. And again, I think that LaFleur loves him and trusts him. And I think the players, I think, really believe in Rich Bisaccia. And so sometimes, when you say addition by subtraction, I think this is one of those situations where it's addition by keeping and connecting and maintaining, I guess, would be it. So again, I understand special teams did not perform to the level of which we would have liked to have seen them this year. But again, I think his value to this organization is much more of that assistant head coach than it is that special teams coordinator. And
the other question I would have, too, over that is how much is it, with the personnel? Because when he first joined up, you had was it Sean Levitt's coming in, and Rudy Ford was initially brought in for special teams. Eric Wilson was initially brought in for special teams and such, and it was kind of a younger unit. Do you feel like they should maybe go with that same mindset and maybe bring in a couple veterans to help out that special teams unit this offseason?
I do. I do. I think it's valuable to bring guys in that have, again, just been around the block and have seen some things. So, yeah, I think bringing in some of those guys that can bring value to the special teams every once in a while, step in if needed be, because, again, we saw it this year. Zane Anderson, Eric Wilson, those types of guys had to step in this year and actually did okay when they stepped in. So you got to find that balance between this guy's a really good special teams guy, and this guy is also somebody who could step in. I always go back to, kind of an unsung hero of that Packers Super Bowl run with Jarrett Bush. I thought, again, he brought a lot to the table from a special team standpoint. But, Packer fans might forget he had a big interception in the Super Bowl. And so, again, I think you've got to find that balance. But, yes, going out and getting guys with that special teams mentality, I think, is a big part of the equation.
Looking at the offensive line, Joe, the big one out there is Josh Myers is a free agent coming up. We didn't get to see Jordan Morgan a whole lot this year, but, I think Sean Ryan impressed some people. Rasheed Walker, maybe a little question marks just because we didn't know what to expect at left tackle. You got Zach Tom doing his thing and Elton Jenkins is doing his thing. How do you see this offensive line going into the offseason? Do you think they should try to re-sign Josh Myers? It sounds like Jordan Love loves him. The franchise really respects him. Matt LaFleur mentioned his name as a guy he goes to get the vibe in the locker room. Should that be a priority for them, or should it be kind of similar to maybe like John Ryan last year? Go get a number, come back, and we'll see if we can meet somewhere.
Yeah, I think that's the case. It's interesting when Matt LaFleur talks about players that he leans on for the vibe or the mood of the team, if you will. Josh Myers is mentioned in there, and you mentioned the Jordan Love connection. And so I think what Green Bay does is, again, they've got a number in mind, and if Myers goes out and gets a heck of a deal and a mountain of a deal, then they're going to say, okay, Josh, thank you, but we're not going to match that. But I don't know if he's going to get that offer. And so, Josh Myers might be back. Look, the bottom line with that offensive line, and again, I think Josh Jacobs, I thought he did a really nice job this year making yardage that wasn't there. And so I think this offensive line has room to grow. The bottom line is they need depth. You look at what happened in that Eagle game, and you look at what the Packer offensive line was left with at the end of that game, and it was not ideal. So if you can bring Josh Myers back because of everything you mentioned, and again, he's a LaFleur guy, he's one of the core guys, then you bring him back. It almost goes back to the Bisaccia thing, that, look, are you going to gain more with Josh Myers being there both on and off the field than you will by losing him? So I think it is one of those deals. I think it's Josh, go test the market, let us know what you're getting out there, and then we'll see if we can bring it back. Green Bay has the salary cap room. There's no question they have the room. And when you look at the free agents this offseason, I look at Josh Myers, obviously, as a guy that you're saying, okay, that's a guy that we would like to bring back. But then I would say Brandon McManus is probably right up there. And really the only other guy that I look at from a value standpoint is T.J. Slayton. And so Green Bay doesn't have a lot of needs to re-sign guys from an internal standpoint. And so do you pay Josh Myers a little bit more maybe to stay because of that comfort level? Maybe you do, and you still continue to build depth on that offensive line, because you can never have too much depth when you're talking the O-line.
If Green Bay decides to move on from Jair, and let's say they draft a corner, maybe, I don't know, first round, second round, or whatever, but say your corners are day one, game one, whoever that is, whoever that's against, it's Keyshawn and Carrington on the outside and Javon Bullard at the nickel. Are you okay with that, or are you concerned about that's your top three? And let's call it, I know it's a nickel defense, but nickel's pretty much base now these days.
Right. I'm okay with that. I am actually okay with that as a starting three. And again, I like Bullard a lot better in the slot than I do at that safety position. And do I see him making a jump next year? I do. And working at both positions, it helps and hurts some of these young guys. And I always go back to Micah Hyde, where he comes in and he was kind of a tweener where he played nickelback, and he then moves to safety with Buffalo full time, and he really blossomed. And so I look at the same type of situation where you got to find where this guy's groove is, where is his best position, and then you put him there and play him there. So yes, I am. If you went into the opening game of the season with those three, I am good, knowing what you have too at that safety position, because now you have, you're saying Evan Williams, I'm assuming, and obviously Xavier McKinney. So yeah, now you look at the totality of that secondary, and I feel good about that. And again, looking at the other pieces of the puzzle, and figuring in other guys at that front seven level, yeah, then I feel really good about that defense. They didn't. Again, look what the Eagles did to Washington, and look at what the Eagles have done this whole postseason, and look at what Green Bay did to that offense. And they really did the best job this postseason on that Eagle offense. And so I feel Green Bay's defense rounding into form. Yes, you're going to draft a cornerback for depth or even competing for a starting position, but I don't mind at all what Green Bay has coming back if it were to be Keyshawn Nixon, Javon Bullard, and Carrington at that other position.
All right, before I let you go, one more question, because we were talking about linebackers the other day. I mean, we're all excited about Edgerrin Cooper and such. You got Quay Walker. How big of a need, though, is it for the Packers to maybe find another linebacker to pair up with those two?
Oh, it's huge. You're going to play a 4-3. You've got to have three backers. I get it. You need two backers primarily from a nickel standpoint. You going back to that. That's typically your base defense. But you still need that guy. You still need somebody to come in and play that third position when you're truly going with a 4-3. And so I think Green Bay does draft someone. And again, this kind of goes back to our original point. Do they draft someone who maybe can play and step in and but also bring special teams value? One guy that we don't talk about is Hopper from last year, and so from that draft. And so Hopper, right, Captain?
Yep.
That's who I'm thinking of? Yeah, okay. So that's a guy that I think flashed a little bit this offseason, and so that's a guy who might step in to that top 3 or 4 as well. So, but drafting that type of position, you can never go wrong.
He's Joe Daguanno joining us here this morning, chatting some Green and Gold. We appreciate the time as always, man. I'll let you go and actually go do your job right now and make some. Well, gotta make some bacon, right? So gotta go and do that.
Well, I got to tell you, and again, I love being up here. It is fantastic. The people are great up here, and it was a virtual winter wonderland up here last night and this morning. But it's fun being up here, and it's fun talking with Packer fans at a bar and talking about Aunt Bobo, who was in a Brett Favre jersey. So, again, it's just Packer fans are everywhere, and it's always fun talking to them.
Absolutely. Well, hey, we appreciate the time, man, and enjoy the rest of the week, and we'll see you soon, okay, sir?
All right, Captain. Take care, man.
All right, let's wrap up this episode of the podcast talking a little Brian Gutekunst. How would you grade, assess the job performance of Brian Gutekunst? After the season was over with, there was a lot of talk about Matt LaFleur's job performance and the coaching staff's performance, and position coaches, coordinators, et cetera, et cetera. You talk about players and their job performance. We've done that, right? We've talked about position groups and individual players. But how would you assess the job that Goody has done, not only just for this year, but since 2018? Since 2018. I want to, and part of it, I bring this up for a couple reasons. One, I mean, it's the end of the season. That's part of it. But the first reason, we're going to get through some quotes here from Rob DeMasi, our good buddy Rob from ESPN. I have some quotes from some other executives across the league on the type of job that Goody has done. But also, you look at this Super Bowl matchup with the Chiefs and the Eagles, and if we were to rank the top GMs in the league right now, these two GMs would be easily top 5, possibly very, very possible top 2 for me. Howie Roseman for the Eagles, Brett Veach for the Chiefs. You look at how they've constructed these teams. Chiefs, a lot of money to Patrick Mahomes. They've paid a lot of money to Chris Jones, Travis Kelce, and such. The super impressive part of what he's been able to do is build that defense with draft picks, and those guys contributing at high levels in their rookie years, second years, third years, and just finding those players that fit what Spags wants to do on the defensive side or what Andy Reid wants to do on the offensive side, and finding these free agents, sometimes some bargain stuff. I mean, you trade for Hollywood Brown and then you sign you get DeAndre Hopkins. You kind of plug in They've plugged in these different receivers over the years, or they've gotten a different running back every couple of years, whether it was Kareem Hunt or Clyde Edwards-Helaire, now Isaiah Pacheco. He's done a fantastic job of finding those players. And the same with the Eagles. I mean, they've shelled out a lot of money, especially on the offensive side. You're paying two receivers a lot of cash. You spent a lot on Jalen Hurts. You signed Saquon Barkley. You've built up that offensive line. You've added a lot of young talent on the defensive side over there too. So, I mean, you've got two general managers in this Super Bowl that have done fantastic jobs. Howie Roseman's been doing it a little bit longer, but throughout their careers, just fantastic. Fantastic, especially as of as recently as this year in the last few years. So comparing that to the job that Goody has also done, how would you assess the job performance of one Brian Gutekunst? A couple quotes. So this was, again, you can check it on ESPN, Rob Demoski's piece. It's titled Packers Trusting in General Manager's Gutekunst's Plan to Compete for a Super Bowl. It opens it up as Brian Gutekunst is a planner, always has been. Just ask anyone who has worked with him since he joined the Packers as a scouting intern in 1997 or since he became the team's general manager in 2018. Quote, some guys just throw blank on the board and think it's a plan. It's an NFL personnel analyst who has worked for the Packers in multiple capacities. This is a clear plan. He has a 3-year plan and a 5-year plan. You can see that by the way he has shaped this roster. As Rob notes, this was merely year 2 of that plan. So far, it has resulted in back-to-back postseason appearances with no signs that this is the end, but rather another step on the way to getting the Packers back to the Super Bowl. Would you agree with that? Do you agree with that assessment? An assistant GM with another team had this to say, the way he's building the team is good. You won't hit on every player, but he has managed the team well. Maybe need one more impact player, but those are hard to just go and find. A couple other things here that I thought were interesting from some quotes here. This was actually from Kenny Clark. I've been a part of a lot of great teams here. This is one of the best just based off of our depth. We got a lot of great players at the top of the depth chart, but the more you look at our depth, we got a lot of guys that can play. It hasn't been like that in the years past. So, yeah, they've been doing a great job of drafting and just bringing some dogs in here. So, I thought there was one more I wanted. Yeah, here was another opposing general manager had to say. He went and got Jacobs and McKinney and has drafted well. Just a little bit of bad luck that all those division teams are loaded as well. So I look at the performance, and Goody was in a very, I mean, you look at everything. So when he inherited the job from Ted Thompson, his first year on the job, 2018, you had Aaron Rodgers. He inherited Mike McCarthy as his head coach. I think, we could tell, I think, at that point that maybe it was, I don't know if it was necessary, if we could tell it was trending downward. But there were just kind of some weird vibes. And we know what happened in that 2018 season. It was just awful. Right? I mean, you start off that game against the Bears. Rodgers gets hurt, makes a miraculous comeback in the second half. It's like, all right. Following week, you ended a tie in the Vikings, and I was at that game, and it was like 100 degrees. Okay, not, but maybe in the 90s. But then that was, later on as the season transpired, it got going. Mike McCarthy gets fired after the Cardinals game, and you kind of, now Goody's like, all right, got to go. We got to find a new coach. 2019 is the Matt LaFleur era. Also that offseason, after the Packers missed out on the playoffs, they finished 6 wins that season, 6-10. What does he do that offseason? He's like, okay, I've got Rodgers. We've got Devontae. We need some defensive help here. He goes and signs Za'Darius, Preston Smith, Adrian Amos, and Billy Turner. I still remember that day. We were on the air, and it was like coming through one after another. It's like, oh, they signed Zadarius. Sweets. They got one. Because at that time, we didn't know what kind of general manager Goody was going to be. Was he going to be like a Ted and, not do a whole lot in free agency? We didn't have a long history of that. We didn't have a good basis. We didn't have a good track record of what type of general manager Goody was going to be. And then all of a sudden, it was like all four in one day. It was like, holy moly, who is this guy? We actually have something to look forward to in free agency? Are you kidding me? So 2019, we don't know how the season's going to go. First-time head coach. They end up going to the NFC Championship game and getting throttled by the 49ers. But you're probably feeling pretty good about the future. Then 2020 happens, and it's the whole COVID thing. But, again, they top seed, home field advantage, NFC Championship games at Lambeau. Tom Brady ruined that. Or Kevin King. Whatever you want to point the blame. Or Matt LaFleur in decision-making at the end. 2021. Then that's when you really kind of the Rodgers stuff really started to peak up again, right? That was the whole Rodgers drama then. And it's like, now he's got to deal with that. And then he drafts Jordan Love, by the way, too, in 2020. So it's like, oh, okay. I was one of them that criticized the pick. So now you got the Rodgers stuff happening in the offseason. You got to deal with that. You're not trading him. You hold pat. You stand tall. You have another season where, one of the best tops in the league, but you fall short in the playoffs. Divisional round, 49ers, right? Then, miss out on the last year of the postseason of the Rodgers era, that final game. You transition to the Jordan Love era. You made, I would say, you made some questionable decisions with the Rodgers contract, but I think we all got it at that point. The way it was just constructed was like, good Lord, that's going to kill you in terms of salary cap. And it did for a little bit. But I thought it was impressive at that point in time, handling all that Rodgers drama, and the guy still played that year. Now, the following year, he was gone. It's time to go to the Jordan Love era. And Jordan Love's first year, I think, again, we didn't have a whole lot of expectations. You didn't bring in a whole lot of, free agents and such because you were dealing with a lot of dead cap space and couldn't do a whole lot. But you made the postseason. You drafted well. It looked like, that might have been Goody's, perhaps one of his best draft class, if not the best draft class. Just a lot of players. A lot of good players. Second year of the Jordan Love era, this year two of this plan. A lot of expectations coming into the season because of year one of the Jordan Love era. He goes out, Goody gets Xavier McKinney, goes out and gets Josh Jacobs and all that. Some solid moves over there. So you factor all that in. You factor the Rodgers stuff. You factor in having to get a new coach after, a year, not even like half a season in his 10 years as general manager. You look at some of his picks, a lot of good ones. A lot of good stuff over there. I think the biggest downfall, and I don't know if a lot of people view this the same way, if you had to maybe knock him in one area, is probably first-round picks. But it and I'm not making an excuse for it. I think it depends on your approach on how you view first-round picks in terms of a general manager approach. Because it's clearly evident, I think. It's not always the case, but the Jair one might have been a little bit of the exception to the rule because Jair could play right away. But I think you look at the first-round picks of Goody's tenure, and they have been picks that I would argue are picks geared more towards the future plan. Not necessarily for the now, but for the future. Rashawn Gary. I think Darnell they thought more for the now, but Rashawn Gary was definitely more for the future after he had Zadarius and Preston already. Jordan Love definitely was for the future. That one's clear. Lucas Van Ness. I think Devontae Wyatt was more of a for the future pick too. Quay got in right away. So there was a couple that I think, impact players or players that were going to play right away. But for the most part, his first-round picks have been guys that I think were viewed as, okay, their ceiling is really high. Their talent or they're ready their readiness to play right away might be a little bit lower than some of these other guys that are still on the draft board. But we view their ceiling as higher than these other guys. Like, they could be, like, in a couple years, in a few years, the best at their position. And I feel like that's the approach that Goody has with first-round picks. And then, you kind of plug in these other players, second through fifth, which they've done a really good job. Goody has done a really good job, I think. Second round, day 2, early parts of day 3. That's why I love day 2 of the draft, the second and third round. I love those picks because, and I think most of it, the reason why I like it, I think, is because in recent history, we have seen those guys being asked to be contributors right away. I mean, Jaden Reed was a second-round pick. Christian Watson was a second-round pick. Edrin Cooper this past year was a second-round pick. Tucker Kraft, Luke Musgrave, second, third-round picks. We've seen those guys, come in and be like, doesn't matter that you're not a first-round pick. They've been getting more playing time initially in their rookie years than some of the first-round picks over there. And I think that's why I really like second and third round, the day 2 picks, because in the last few years or so under the Goody tenure, those have been guys that have been asked to play right away and contribute right away. So if there was and again, maybe, and I think that's the approach. So if that's the approach, then maybe you don't knock Goody for his selections in the first round as much, because then you can make the argument, well, have those players reach their potential. And for some, you could say, no, not yet. Or no, they haven't. Darnell didn't work out. Maybe Rashawn Gary isn't playing at the level that we expected, especially after a new contract in that. I mean, he's shown flashes, right? He's shown some good seasons overall in that. Jair was up there, but now the dude can't stay healthy. Lucas Van Ness is going to be entering his third year. Devontae Wyatt, I thought, had that year this year, but again, health-wise. We heard from Xavier McKinney. He thinks he's going to be, Xavier McKinney thinks Quay Walker's going to be the best linebacker in football. But I think, overall, I'd probably grade Goody a B. When it's all said and done, we grade or we assess your careers or your job performance based off one thing, and that's championships. And that's Super Bowl wins. That's why everybody is in this league. Players, coaches, well, maybe not all players. Players might be in it for, some might be just in it for a straight cash, homie. But the general managers, the front office people, the coaches, and majority of players, some players, are in it for, for the championship, for a Super Bowl title. And that's how we judge the careers and the job performance for a lot of these people. And right now, Goody doesn't have that. Packers don't have that during his tenure. So for me, I can't give it an A for a big part because of that. And when I see, Brett Veach, who started in 2017, and yes, I think it definitely helps a guy like Brett Veach to have Andy Reid as his head coach. That, no question, helps out a ton. Then I look at a guy like Howie Roseman with the Eagles. He's gone through how many different coaches? And then, last offseason, it was like, is Nick Sirianni going to be around? Is he on the hot seat? Let's face it, the Eagles were trending downward last year. They made the playoffs, but that era was down. What does Howie Roseman do? He's like, you're going to get this coordinator and that coordinator. You're going to hire Vic Fangio. You're going to hire Kellen Moore. And then I'm going to give you Saquon Barkley. And, I got the draft. I got this. This is my thing. I'm going to get you some players there. And they're back in the Super Bowl. A year ago today, we still didn't know if Nick Sirianni was going to be the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles. There was still some So, Goody, to me, though, I would put it about a B. I don't want to rank all 32 general managers, but if you told me that Goody would be a top 10 general manager, I probably wouldn't bat an eye. I probably wouldn't be like, oh, okay, yeah. I'd agree with that. I think you look at a couple other teams in this division, you look at what Holmes has done in Detroit, you put him in that equation. No question about it. He should be up there. for all the talent that they've acquired. You look at the job that Minnesota has done there, too. If you want to put Quefe over, then, I can never say his name, so I apologize. But you want to put him in there? Yeah. John Lynch? Okay. But if for Goody's purposes, if you say he's a top 10 general manager, I'm not going to argue that. But I wouldn't put him in the same tier as these two general managers right now that are in the Super Bowl because, Brett Veach has won. He's going for 3 in a row right now, and they've. Here's another nugget for like a little throwback Thursday. Today was the day that Alex Smith got traded to Washington, which opened the door to Patrick Mahomes being the starter. And he has started in every AFC Championship game since then. That is ridiculous. That's insane. Okay? That's insane. So I think Goody has done a good job. And I think Goody has surprised a lot of us in the sense of he's not just a straight up Ted Thompson disciple. And I think that was a concern that maybe some fans had when he got promoted. Was like, oh, it's going to just be all draft. We're not doing anything in free agency again. Status quo. No. I mean, there's still a draft and develop team. But, Goody has been active in free agency when he can be. When he's got cash to spend. He has shown that. I would love for somebody to come up with a graph and kind of compare the amount of money like Ted Thompson has spent in free agency with outside free agents, like not guys that were originally drafted by Green Bay and re-signing, compared to what Goody is right now. Because just off the top of my head, the big ones that I think of for Ted were Ryan Pickett, Charles Woodson, Martellus Bennett, and Julius Peppers. And then for Goody, you throw in Za'Darius, you throw in Preston, you throw in Adrian, you throw in Billy Turner, you throw in Xavier McKinney, you throw in Josh Jacobs. So I feel like Goody is a little bit of a mixture of both. He started off as a scout. Well, that was under Ron Wolf. I feel like he's got a little bit of a mixture between Ron Wolf and Ted in there. And I think that's a good mixture. But ultimately, it comes down to the question, do you trust in Goody? Remember the old phrase, in Ted we trust? Do you trust in Goody to build you a roster, to build you a team that can win you a Super Bowl? And right now, my answer is yes, I do. I trust that. All right, that is going to do it for us on this episode of the 715 Green and Gold Tailgate podcast. As always, follow and subscribe to the podcast, or it could be this podcast or the Man Cave podcast. Better yet, follow and subscribe to both. Give us a positive rating and a positive review so others can find the podcast as well. Till next time, I'm Dan Casper, and I will talk to you on the next episode of the 715 Green and Gold Tailgate podcast.